Well, welcome to the virtual cooking class today. We are going to be making a baked apple and walnut oatmeal. And so we're going to also share at the end a few different ways that you can use this dish. Our theme this month was fuel and satisfy. And so this recipe is going to provide really great energy, whether you're starting your day as a breakfast or if you're using it as a snack in between meals or prior to a workout. And it's also going to be a great way to satisfy some of your cravings for something sweet, something comforting. So I thought this was a great, well-rounded recipe that's a really nice balanced recipe, but is also really appealing. I mean, it smells incredible. If you make this at home, you're going to be thinking you definitely have dessert in the oven. So that's what we're going to start out with. We're going to preheat our ovens to 400 degrees. And let that get heated up. And then if you are cooking along or planning to make this, you're also going to want to use a baking dish that is around a 9 by 9. This is actually an 8 by 8, so it's going to be a little bit of a thicker oatmeal bar. And then you're going to want to spray it really well with some cooking spray, because when we take these out, we want them to come out in nice bars. So we don't want them to get stuck. Now, it's still perfectly edible if it comes out a little crumbly. That's happened to me a couple times. I have made do, but sprayed out really good so that you can get those nice clean bars at the end. So we're going to start out with our apple. And so I'm using a Honeycrisp apple like the recipe calls for. And so you can use any kind of apple you like. Personally, I love a Gala apple. I eat one like every day. If my husband shops, he gets Fuji, or right now we have Macintosh. But apples are such a great little package of nutrition that you can throw in your bag on the go and have with you as a nice handy snack, and full of nutrition and fiber to keep you full and satisfied. And you know what they say, apple a day keeps the doctor away. And there's always more and more research coming out to show that that truly is the case. It's a great little package of nutrition. So it also tastes great and is a natural, sweet treat. So a few options for chopping this up. The recipe says to core it and chop it into small pieces. And so I'm going to show you, so I would normally just cut this on a cutting board myself. I don't have any kind of fancy apple core things, but if you do, that's awesome. Use those. I'm just going to cut around the core of my apple. And a Honeycrisp is so good. It's perfect for me, perfect level of sweetness. And I like a really crisp, crunchy apple. We don't want none of that mushy stuff. But this would be a great recipe to use up some apples that may be a little past their prime. So one of the things that I wanted to show you all today is just this little gadget. It's really used for like slicing really thin, say if you want to do like your own homemade baked potato chips or kale chips or anything like that. But the mechanism, or the little gadget that I put on here today, is for julienne, which is like long, skinny strips. So that's going to be a nice fine cut for my apples into really teeny tiny pieces. So I'm just going to use one of these pieces of my apple and stick it onto my holder here. And then I'm going to slide it back and forth, pushing down with a little bit of force. So if you have, like a chopper gadget, or if you have a food processor with like a fine chopped setting, we don't want this, to go into mush. I still want a little bit of the texture of these apples in our bars. But just kind of depending on your preference, you could even do a cheese grater, honestly, and shred the apple, and it's going to get it really nice and fine. And so that could work well too if you don't care so much about the texture of the apples. So as you can see, it's got this nice julienne little strips. But like I said, I'm normally just a good old knife and cutting board kind of girl. And so I would take my apple and, using the claw for safety, lay it on its flat edge and do some really nice thin strips using a smaller chef's knife. And then we'll go back through and chop it. And I'm going to save a few of these small strips for some like garnish as when we plate it up. So we'll go ahead and take some of like the finest, skinniest, prettiest cuts and put those to the side for a little bit of a little bit of garnish. And then I'm just going to chop these into small pieces. So with choosing your apples, apples are often, almost every year, on the dirty dozen, meaning that if you are not buying organic, they are going to be higher in levels of pesticides and residue. So I do recommend, if you have the budget to purchase organic, go and check out the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list for produce each year. And if you're choosing what to splurge on for organic, go for the items that you eat often. Like, I eat an apple almost every day. I love strawberries. We always have strawberries. Those are the items on the Dirty Dozen that I'm going to splurge and get organic if I can. And also considering, like, if you're eating the peel or not. So you can certainly peel these apples before throwing them into this recipe. The fiber and like the bulk of this food is mainly in the skin of the apple. So I'm going to keep the skin on my apple for this recipe, but that means that I need to wash this produce really well too. So whether you're buying organic or not, but especially if it's not organic, then you want to wash your produce really well. And again, that goes for all produce, but especially non-organic when you're eating the peels or the skins. So I typically do a baking soda wash. Just research shows that it's the most effective way to get pesticide residue off of your food. A quick running water rinse is always, if nothing else, a quick rinse under running water. But the baking soda soak, you just take 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 2 cups of cold water, and you make a little bath, and you let your vegetables soak in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. And that is a really great job of cleaning your produce before you consume it. All right, so we've got everything chopped up nice and fine. I'm not a chef, so don't, grade my chopping skills, but I know the basics. And then we're going to go ahead and sprinkle our chopped apple along the bottom of our baking dish. And then we're going to get started on the filling that we're going to pour over it. Okay. And then we'll take what I got from the little mandolin tool. And I think I got this off Amazon. It has a little spiralizer tool for like spaghetti squash or zucchini. And then it's got a few different chopping options. So it is pretty handy to have around. It's not too hard to clean. So I've just lined the bottom of that with our apples. And now we're going to start on our filling. So let me move this out of the way. I don't think we'll need this. We're going to start with our dry ingredients. And so I've already measured out our oats. I'm just using old-fashioned oats like the recipe calls for. So we've got 1 1/4 cups of those. And then measuring out the rest of our dry ingredients, I'm going to check our recipe here. We're going to do 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar. Okay, so I'm going to pack it down into my measuring cup like it calls for. Add that. And then we're going to add 1/2 cup each of our nuts and our dried fruit. So the recipe calls for walnuts and raisins, which I think would be delicious in this recipe. However, I really prefer pecans, so that's what I'm going to do. So I've just got some pecan chips from the baking aisle in the grocery store. So they're already nice and finely chopped up for me. So 1/2 cup of those. And then I also really love the combination of apples and cranberries like you typically would do in the fall. So I'm going to go ahead and do dried cranberries instead of raisins here. But again, you could use any dried fruits you want. All right, give a little extra chew to our bars and a little extra color. And then we're going to add in our baking powder, cinnamon, and salt. So we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And, you all know me, I don't normally measure out spices and stuff, but for baking, it's a little more important to be accurate. So I'm going to measure out our 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. our teaspoon and a half of ground cinnamon, which I do think you could go a little extra on this one if you wanted to, but we'll stick to the recipe today. All right, so that's a teaspoon and extra half. And then we'll add in our half a teaspoon of salt. So after this, we're just going to give it a good mix. Can y'all see this okay? Yeah, hopefully so. My screen is smaller than it usually is, so I have to play around with those settings for next time. Okay, there's our salt. And we're just going to mix it with a spoon, just so all of our dry ingredients are incorporated together. And quite honestly, this little mixture here, if you were to leave out the fruit, you could toast this on a baking tray and it would make a really good homemade granola, just as is with these ingredients. And then towards the end of, I'm breaking up some of my brown sugar. Towards the end of your roasting in the oven, you could add in the dried fruit, and yeah, it would make a really good homemade granola mixture. Okay, so now we're going to do our wet ingredients, add to that. So this recipe calls for some liquid eggs. And, you know, I think that as far as a heart healthy recipe, this is a good choice because it's going to have no saturated fat, no cholesterol. So if you're watching your heart health, this can be a good choice. It's basically just egg whites that have already been separated for you. So I like it because it's just a lot cleaner. It's not as messy. And, you know, eggs, we've got to be really careful washing our hands and all that when we're cracking an egg and everything. So I like it just for the ease and convenience of it. It calls for 1/3 cup of our liquid egg whites, and you can see what it looks like there. You haven't used it before. And I like this particular one because it's not the egg substitute, it's the actual 100% egg whites, liquid egg whites. So look at the ingredients. So the only ingredient here is egg whites, which is what I'm looking for. I don't want the one that has the added preservatives and fake coloring and stuff like that. So we got 30 cup egg whites, and then we're going to add in some milk. The recipe calls for fat-free milk just because we're trying to lower that amount of saturated fat, which is the kind of fat that hurts our cholesterol and our heart health. I'm actually using a plant-based milk because that's just what I like. And so I'm using an unsweetened vanilla almond milk today. And so we're going to do same amount for if you decide to use a milk substitute of any kind, oat milk, soy milk, almond milk, you're going to do the same amount, which is 1 1/3 cups of the milk. So what we're making is basically a vanilla custard to go into our bars and to help them cook up really nice and firm and flavorful. And this is also adding in a little bit of protein. Now, when we take out the egg yolks, we are losing a good amount of B vitamins and iron. So I think that this recipe could also be used with whole eggs. I'm just not sure the number of eggs you would need. But if I was to try it that way, I would probably start by trying it with 2 eggs and see how that goes. So now we're going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla for our vanilla custard. And we're just going to whisk this all together for our wet ingredients. Now, the next thing we need to do is melt our margarine. And so I've got a little bowl here, and I'm going to get my margarine out of the fridge. I'm using, I can't believe it's not butter. So the purpose of the margarine, again, is that it's going to be a lot lower in saturated fat. This is not going to have any animal products in it at all. Your typical spreadable margarine used to be made with trans fats, which we really want to avoid. So most of the recipes have been changed now for margarines where you're not going to see trans fat anymore. But just a little disclaimer that, you know, sometimes it's better to go with the more natural ingredients and just watch your portion than to go for the more processed man-made substitute that, you know, for the sake of the nutrition label looking a little nicer. So that's really a personal preference. I like the I can't believe it's not butter. I like the taste. I like that it's much lower in saturated fat because I am watching my cholesterol. And it's a little bit lower in calories. And I think the flavor is good. So that's kind of my butter substitute of choice. Oh, as I throw it across the counter. So we're just going to pop it in the microwave. It's going to melt much quicker than butter, obviously. So I'm only going to do 15 seconds. So we'll let that melt down, and then we're going to combine our liquid ingredients and our melted margarine into our dry ingredients, and then we're going to pour it over our apples. It's going to be very hot coming out of the microwave. Right, pour in our melted margarine. And now let's combine all of this. So it's going to be very soupy, a very loose mixture, where it's just custard with our dry ingredients. So it's not going to be forming any kind of like dough or batter or anything like that. So it's going to be very loose, and that is what we would expect to see. Just going to keep incorporating make sure all that good cinnamon gets distributed in there. Okay, so just very soupy. And we're going to pour this over our apples as evenly as we can, trying to make sure the granola and everything gets distributed well over top the liquid. All right. So oatmeal is one of the best, like healthiest things you can choose for your breakfast. And so I find that, the variety within that is really important so that I can continue to consume something that has so much good protein and fiber and nutrients and staying power that I'm full and satisfied. But to make sure that I'm satisfied, I've got to also include some variety in how I'm preparing it, what I'm topping it with. And so this is just like another fun take on your typical oatmeal. I do overnight oats in the refrigerator sometimes. There's just different ways to still get that really nutrition packed dish into my day without feeling like I'm forcing myself to eat a bowl of oatmeal a few times a week. So it's also a great plant-based protein option to start your day. If you are trying to cut back a little bit on eggs and bacon and sausages and things like that, this is going to keep you full and provide that really powerful plant protein and staying power. So let's get this in the oven. We're going to let it bake for 25 minutes. So I'm putting that on the center rack, and it's going to go for 25 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer. And when it's done, we will take a toothpick to test it. So here comes the TV magic. I've already got our completed dish for the sake of time today. So I'm going to bring that over, let you see. So this is what it's going to look like when it comes out of your oven. So you can see the custard base there and a nice crisp top of granola. And then when we do the toothpick test, we're going to put it in and it's going to come out completely clean. And if it's not, then you need to pop it in for another 3 minutes or so at a time until it's done. So in my oven, I think I cooked this closer to 28 to 30 minutes and then let it sit on the counter for at least 10 or 15 minutes. Mine's been out for probably about 30 minutes. So now we're going to give it the real test and see how it cuts up as we get this out of here. So we're going to plate it up a few different ways. So we'll start by just cutting it into bars. And so the first most obvious way would be to actually just eat this as a little oatmeal snack bar. So I'm going to get out a piece of parchment paper. Nice and noisy parchment paper. And I'm going to scoop out a bar for us to see here. And it's staying together fairly well because of that custard base. So there's our bar. I'm going to put it into our parchment paper. So it's just going to be a really nice, soft textured bar. I'm going to wrap it in my parchment. And I'm going to put it in my Ziploc bag. to have as a delicious snack on the go. I would probably pair this with like a banana, something like that. Or if you wanted more protein, you could do like a boiled egg. And there we go. So there's a nice little snack option. And then we're going to do our breakfast option. So I'm going to plate this up with some yogurt. So getting a serving of probiotics in your day is a great way to support healthy bacteria in your gut, support your gut microbiome. And so yogurt is one great way to do that. This is a plain Greek yogurt, which I have at all times in my fridge because I use it in place of sour cream. I use it as a sour cream substitute. But since I'm serving this as a breakfast, I'm going to sweeten my yogurt because I don't want it to taste like sour cream. And so I'm just going to use the same brown sugar that we did in the recipe. And I'm going to do about half a teaspoon to this 6-ounce serving of yogurt. I'm going to do a full teaspoon. All right, I'm going to do a teaspoon of brown sugar and just mix that in. You could use honey or maple syrup to sweeten your plain Greek yogurt as well. You can obviously buy vanilla Greek yogurt. I always recommend watching added sugars on the label and choosing a yogurt that has less than 10 grams of added sugar to it. But I find that this is really sweet enough for me. So that's what we're going to go with today. And then I'm going to take a bar and I'm actually going to allow this one, if you get one that's a little more crumbly, doesn't really want to cooperate as well, then let's just go with that. And we're going to kind of break it over our yogurt. So it doesn't have to be fully formed. And you know what? I think I'm going to do a little bit more on this one. Okay. Worked so hard to get those lovely bars and then just to break it apart. There we go. And then we're going to top this one with some fresh fruit. So I've got some strawberries and raspberries here. Raspberries look so good. Add some more color, more fruit. I think I'm just going to do raspberries on this, actually. Just looks really nice. And then I'm going to finish it off with a sprinkle of that cinnamon to complement what's in the bars and just to give it a pretty little finishing touch. All right. There's our breakfast option, a nice yogurt bowl. Okay. And then in the last, and of course, my preferred way to enjoy this dish is as dessert. So we're going to fuel and satisfy with this lovely vanilla custard apple bar. Look at that. How pretty. And then we're going to top it with some whipped topping. I used to hate this stuff as a kid, and now I love it. Oh my goodness. I love a whipped topping. So we're going to just, really go for it. All the whipped topping that I want. And then I'm going to put a few of those apple slices that I cut up before just for a little decoration. Here we go. And a lovely dessert. So let's give this one a try. Grab a clean fork. See how we did. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you try this one at home. It's been a favorite of our team at Live Life Well. It's so good, you guys. It's really yummy. All the deliciousness and nutrition of oatmeal, but with that lovely vanilla custard base, it just makes a huge difference. And the crunch of the nuts. It's really good. So I hope you try it. And I hope to see you in our next virtual cooking class. Thanks and have a great rest of your day.